Hi everyone, welcome to the Future of Sports coverage with myself, Kayvan Salmanpour, Chief Commercial Officer at Boston Globe Media, and Brian Hoyer, former quarterback, and you were at the NFL for
15 years, yeah.
15 years.
And technically not former yet because I haven't signed the retirement papers. So if the right team calls, then maybe I hop back out of the sports media, back into the playing. So
Love it.
You never know. I mean, the NFL is every year. There's injuries. You never know what may happen. So not officially retired yet, but we'll see.
And so you have this incredible show, Quick Snap,
Yeah.
which we're going to talk about with Patriots center David Andrews.
Mm-hmm.
And please check it out. It's on YouTube. It's an exclusive look inside the locker room. You cover games, upcoming matchups. The chemistry is fantastic between you two.
Yeah, it was something that kind of came about last minute through Shadow Lion, and when I knew I had an opportunity with David, someone that I've been teammates with for a long time. We have a really great relationship. I knew it would be something unique, especially around here when for all these years Bill was the head coach and the media was kind of one way. And so this was an opportunity to maybe give the fans a look outside of being too analytical, behind the scenes, tell some fun stories, have some great guests on, and it's been a lot of fun. Of all the things that I'm doing in the media right now, it's the one thing that really makes me laugh and gets me excited, and a big part of that is being able to do it with a good friend like David.
Yeah, and we should get into that. But before we talk about the show, before we talk about sports and media in general, my first question is around just how difficult is it being an NFL quarterback, and how has the game changed from your first season to the 15th?
Yeah, I think firstly, in my opinion, and I know I'm a little biased because it's what I did for 15 years, there's no harder position in all of sports. One, because you have to be physically and mentally talented enough, but on top of that, you have to know what all 10 guys around you are doing on offense. Because if someone doesn't know, they're coming to you to ask. And on top of that, you have to know what the other 11 guys are doing on defense, and that takes a whole week of preparation to go into it. And so for me, I was so fortunate, and I think a big part of why I lasted 15 years is I got to see the best of all time do it day in, day out for the first 4 years of my career. And Tom Brady was the ultimate, competitor. He prepared better than any other person. He pushed everyone around him to be a better player. There's so many things that go into playing quarterback that's not what you see on Sundays, and I think that's what makes it so difficult. Now, I played baseball growing up, and I wouldn't want to be hitting against a guy like Paul Skeens, who's this new phenomenal pitcher. I think hitting a baseball is probably one of the hardest things to do in all of sports. But when it comes to positions, football is such an ultimate team sport, and really that team relies on one guy, to go out there and perform really well in order for their team to have a chance to win. So it's difficult, and secondly, the game's always evolving. I mean, when I watch the games now, it's so different from when I first started, but we were talking on the podcast yesterday, it's kind of circular. The trends kind of come and go and come back, the similar as fashion or whatever it might be. And
evolving in what type of way?
Well, like when I first came into the league, defenses were kind of very simple. I don't want to say simple, but they didn't have as many different variations. And then things started to evolve on offense. The defense had to change. And then now, I just talked about it the other day on a radio show I'm doing, the NFL kind of became a pass-happy league. And up to this point, I know it's only been 3 games, there's like 7 or 8 teams who are running the ball more than they're throwing it, which is really unheard of in the last 10, 15 years, but more similar going back to even before when I came in the league. And so things are always evolving, and I think the good teams, the good coaches are always trying to stay ahead of that curve. And so if you're successful and you don't change, someone will catch you. But if you're successful and you're continuing to evolve and change, the Kansas City Chiefs have done a great job of it recently. The Patriots did it for a long time. I know why now everybody hated us, because now I watch the Chiefs and they're winning all the time. And I'm like, man, I understand now, because people outside of this area, anywhere I would go, they hated that I played for the Patriots. They're like, you guys always win. It's always, they do this or they do that. And you start to see that, you feel that with the Chiefs now. But they've done a tremendous job of continuing to change, evolve who they are. And they have a great coach and players that can do it.
Yeah, nice. As you've evolved your own career into sort of media analyst on ESPN, now you're the host of an amazing podcast show. back in the day when you were a quarterback, you were media trained.
Yeah.
You had to be cautious about what you're saying. And then you were in environments like ESPN, and now you're almost leading the conversation. How do these environments differ? And what was your learning curve throughout it all?
Well, my first exposure to media as a professional was under Bill Belichick, which Bill was notorious for making sure he always would say, you don't have to answer the question for him. You know, give as little as you can, be informative, but you never want to give away any of your scheme because the other team's listening. And you also don't want to give any what we call bulletin board material. And so, you know, he always would say, it's not your job to do their job for them. You know, give them an answer, let them write a story. And, you know, that's how I learned. I even found myself, when I was away from the Patriots playing for other teams, I'd answer a question, I'd be like, God, like, what would Bill think of my response there? But as you get older and you evolve, I think you learn how to handle those situations better. And obviously, being a quarterback, you're required to speak more than any other person. Even when I wasn't the starter, the reporters want to talk to you because they want to get insight into the game plan or whatever it might be. And so I think I had a lot of training when it came to that. And now being on the flip side of it, you know, for me, I think I want to use my presence in the media to be informative. Because I think that's the biggest thing. It's easy to be critical. It's easy to be analytical. But I think to inform the fans, inform the people who are out there listening, you know, I essentially have a master's degree in football. I've spent 15 years in the NFL, 5 years in college. It's what I know best. And I think, you know, it's very easy to go out there and give a frivolous, you know, take on something or a prediction on something. And it's a lot harder to inform people and kind of give them a look behind what goes into it. And that's the one thing about this podcast, was doing it with an active player, which is kind of new thing. I know a lot of players are kind of taking the media in their own hands, but doing it with an active player who's currently in it, a guy who not only played with him, but played for a long time, have that perspective. And, you know, the feedback that I've got has been great. And I think a lot of people, what they love is the stories behind the scenes, you know, hearing about the travel or, you know, the celebrations after a Super Bowl victory or whatever it might be, some things that people don't always have access to. Because I think the one thing, and not everybody, but especially in this area, the players were always very guarded with what they said. Because if you said something wrong and you went in that team meeting the next day, Bill was going to hammer you on it. He's going to say, I remember one time, my rookie year, Tom had hurt his thumb, or his middle finger. And going in the game, we weren't sure if he was going to play or not. And sure enough, he was, you know, the toughest quarterback that's ever played that he was. He got it, you know, numbed up and played, and he was fine. And the media came to me a few days after, and they said, "Well, were you ready to go? Did you know Tom was going to play?" And I said, "Oh, I know he's really tough. I knew he was good to go." And the next day, Bill's like, "Why don't you just let Tom answer for himself? You don't need to speak for him and how he feels." And you know, this is in front of the whole team meeting. And I was like, well, I learned my lesson there. He would just say, speak for yourself, and, you know, don't hit on these topics because we don't want to give too much away. And so, you know, I think for me, learning that from him now as the media person, I don't want to ever put David in a situation where he feels like he's compromising the team, the locker room, whatever that might be. And I think we've done a good job balancing that, because you do want to address, like, you know, they had a tough loss last week. You want to address that. And I think fans want to know, okay, well, what are they going to do to bounce back? And it's good to hear his take on it. But it's also, I think, an opportunity to really share a mindset in a safe space, so to speak.
It is a very safe space. And I feel like there's a trend of trying to celebrate the joy and fun of sports, because traditionally sports media has been quite toxic and quite negative. And do you think it's leveled out now that there are so many of these, that athletes are leading the narrative, or are athletes still semi-distrusting of media?
Well, I think that's why you see a lot of people trying to take it in their own hands, because you can control the narrative. When you have to go answer questions, I mean, some of those questions are going to be tough questions, and it's your job to go and answer those. But I think you see players being like, well, hold on, why can't I just do this on my own? You have access through podcasts, social media, YouTube, all of these things. And I think that's why you see this push, because I think as a player, you're always kind of weary of the media. Like, how are they going to spin this? Because I think, unfortunately, the negativity gets the most clicks. It gets the most attention. And I even see it now. You know, the Patriots win their first game, and I'm sitting there doing the post-game show, and people are starting to say, well, they could have lost if this had happened. But I'm like, but it didn't happen. So why even venture into that? I think you try to find topics to fill space, when in reality, last year I'm sure there was a lot of games they said, well, if they would have done this, they would have won.
Yeah.
And so I think it's always kind of a devil's advocate, and you realize when you go on some of these shows, you need people to take opposite strategies, or else it becomes too monotonous. So I understand that aspect of it, but I think that's why you see guys going out. Obviously, the Kelsey is a big one, and they have a unique situation, obviously being brothers, but playing in two different towns. Obviously, Travis is dating the most famous woman in the world, but people want to listen to that because I think there's no in between. It's straight from the player to the fans to whatever it might be. It's not getting interviewed. Someone has to report on it. There's nothing lost in translation.
And is the NFL or like their lawyers, agents, are they scrutinized? Like every time they're on the mic and they're owning their own narrative and having these conversations, is it being scrutinized or?
Well, I think I know. The one policy is I think it's 60 minutes leading up to a game, 30 minutes after a game. You cannot post on social media. That's a very strict rule because they want to let their media have first access and report on the game. But I think also you always have to have the mindset like you're representing an organization, an owner who owns that team, and the NFL. You wear that, we always call it the shield. That shield's on. So you represent a lot of things when you're out there speaking. So you always have to be mindful of when you speak. Yes, you're speaking for yourself, but you're also speaking for the organization and the league as a whole. And so I think people need to be conscious of that. And so I think other than that kind of leading up to the game and after the game is kind of the only rules. But I think also you can always be held accountable for what you say.
It's funny because I heard this saying that what musicians were at the age of music videos, athletes are in the age of streaming. They've become these like cultural figures.
Yeah.
And they're almost building their business empires whilst playing the game, which is very different to the old way of you play the game and then once you're retired, you go into business.
Yep.
They're doing it whilst playing. Like, how do sports teams, how do coaches deal with this? Is it a distraction?
Well, I think you talk about what's changed in my 15 years. I didn't have social media my first 4 years in the league. I remember this thing called Twitter comes out, and everybody's like, oh, you got to do this. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, you already have an account. And I go, no, I don't. And so I remember creating my Twitter, I guess it's X now, account, just so I would have one and get it verified so there wouldn't be a fake account. I mean, those are things you're having to deal with. You don't want someone out there pretending to be you, sending out some message that isn't what you would want to put out there. So I think that's a huge part of it because now you have direct access to millions of people. You don't have to go through an agent. You don't have to go through a marketing. You can directly. I remember as a kid writing letters and asking for autographs from players. I mean, now you can get on the phone and DM someone and maybe they see it and they respond. And so I think the world has gotten much smaller. And the one thing that we get all this media training. They bring people in and speak to you. And one time we had a general come in and speak to us who was in the military, and he said, you can think whatever you want, but you're always responsible for what you say. And that always hit me. Like, I can think a million things, but if I say it, that's out there and it can't be taken back. And so that always stuck with me, and I think that's why I'm always very conscious of what I'm saying and the message you're trying to deliver.
And I want to get into social in a second, but when these players, if a lot of these athletes are focused on a fashion line, a production company, is it a distraction? Like, when does it become an issue?
Well, I think the only way you can determine if it's a distraction is how you play, because your main job is your main job, and being an athlete is your main job. And so there's guys who are able to do it and do it brilliantly. I look at a guy like Tom. I mean, he goes even 9 years before me, so you kind of saw him, and he was not on social media. And all of a sudden, at the end, I'm with him, and this guy's more on Instagram more than I was. I mean, that's the easiest way for me to communicate with him now. We send each other, memes and stuff like that. But he kind of did it at the end of his career, whereas now guys, I mean, they're doing it in college. I mean, they're getting paid in college to market brands, they're getting paid in college. And so now you see guys coming into the league with that. And it's kind of becoming more of a new way of life. And, Tom always used to say, like, I'm going to make sure I take care of the things on the field and all of that will come later, which has certainly done for him. For me, I was never at that level, and I was like, well, yeah, I have all these opportunities, but if I don't perform on the field, and I feel like those opportunities are taking time away from my preparation, then it's kind of counterproductive. And so I think there's a fine balance, and I think, even with David doing this podcast, I mean, that's an hour of his Monday. I mean, he's got 2 young kids. He's got to go in for meetings. He's got to work out. He's got, so I knew that was a big ask of him during the season to do those things because I've been in that situation.
Yeah.
And, being a starting quarterback, you got to do a weekly radio show. You got to do a press conference on Wednesdays. And there's only so much time and only so much bandwidth that you have. And so I think the people who do it really well, they perform on the field and they perform off the field really well too.
Yeah. So I want to talk about social because it feels like social is such a big part of, especially with these kind of athlete-led podcasts. Like social becomes such a big part of, marketing, of building the brand around it. I'm always conscious of social with my kids.
Yep.
Where does social fit now as you're sort of entering the sports media space? How do you think of social media?
Well, I'm having to get educated on it because for me, I have social accounts, but I guess I kind of call myself more of a voyeur. I get on, I look at the accounts I want to follow, get some information, and I have a private Instagram to share like family things with people that I know personally, and our producer Danny's like, you need a public Instagram. Like we need to be able to like get this content out to people. So I had to do that, and he had to teach me how to do like the collaboration posts and things like that. So, social media is a great thing, but it can be a really bad thing too. And being a parent of a 12 and an 11-year-old, I realized like, there's a lot of things that you have to shelter them from and protect them from. And so for me, it's a very fine balance. I realize the benefits, especially when you're doing the media. But I'm never going to be the person who's watching a football and live tweeting. Like, that's not how I want to live my life.
It's, I guess it's like a necessary evil.
It is. It is. And if that means that I don't get as many opportunities in the media, but I'm able to sit down, like, it's my first year to sit down on the couch and watch a football game with my son. I'm not going to spend time critiquing the plays as they go on. Like, that's just not what I want to do. And some people love it and they do it all the time. I mean, that's who they are, but that's not who I want to be. And my wife tells me I'm on the phone enough. And we were talking before this, like, I feel in a weird way I'm more busy now with all the different things I'm doing than I was as a player, because as a player, you're busy, it's long hours, but it's the same, the schedule, the routine. And now it's like, I'm doing this with you, and then from here I'm gonna go film a show at NBC Sports Boston, and then I'm gonna go see my son's football game, and I gotta go back and do the live show. So it's like I'm all over the place, and the last thing I wanna do is be addicted to that phone. Totally. But I do realize, you're trying to promote things, you gotta be involved in some way.
Yeah. There's been such an explosion of sports media, from like shoulder content of live games, podcasts, long form docs like Beckham or Drive to Survive. Sports teams have huge media arms as well. There's a lot of content. As a fan, it seems great. As an athlete, what are you into, and what do you think is still missing?
I mean, I think anything you want to find is out there. It's if you want to know about fantasy football and you want to listen to people who break down analytics and you want to do those things, great. If you want to find out more about behind the scenes, like obviously in this area, the dynasty of the Patriots, that brought a lot of attention to. I mean, that should have been 20 episodes. 10 episodes wasn't. They skipped, years. They skipped over 2 Super Bowls because there's so much to cover. But I think people got to see some things from a different perspective that you didn't see from, the games on Sunday, the typical media sessions, people being a little more candid. So I think those are all great because it's super informative to the fans. But I really do think if there's something you're looking for in the sports world, someone's doing it out there. And I think, we joked, it's like, oh, you're doing a podcast, and my wife's like, well, everybody does a podcast now. And it is, it's true, but it's something that I don't want to say easy to do because I sit there and I watch the cameras and the people who put the time into the production. But for David and I, we just go sit there and we have some topics, but we kind of just go where the conversation takes us. I mean, the first time we got together, we were just doing like a test run, and we went for an hour and 5 minutes straight, and it was never going to be aired. And our producer was like, "We can't waste this. This is too good. People are going to love it." And so I think. whatever you want to find, it's out
Yeah.
there. And sometimes, you talk about, is it overdone?
Yeah.
As long as people are logging in or clicking
Yeah.
and liking. I mean, that's what I'm. This is a whole new world. I'm realizing you got to get subscribers. You got to get people who like it because, to make it profitable, you need people watching it.
What do you personally like watch or consume?
I like more of the behind the scenes stuff, which is why now, and to me, I think what I'm realizing not playing, this year so far, the thing that I miss the most is the behind the scenes stuff. I mean, the games are great, but I miss walking in tired at 6:30 a.m. and having breakfast with my boys. Like I miss the bus rides. I miss last year we would play cards on the airplane in Las Vegas, and I still to this day a weekly group chat with those guys and those relationships. And I think people getting access to see that. You mentioned the Beckham documentary or the F1 series, things that maybe you're not necessarily interested in, but you get this behind the scenes look. I think it was a Full Swing that's on Netflix about the golfers, and you're seeing, these guys are out going playing golf together the same way that I go play with my friends, they're the best in the world. So I think for me, I gravitate more towards that. But I love football. And so on Sundays, I don't have a problem sitting on the couch and turning the Red Zone on. And we mentioned on our podcast the other day, this guy Scott Hansen on NFL Network, he goes from 1 p.m. until the games are over at 7, and he's just nonstop. All right, we're at the Detroit Lions and the Arizona Cardinals, and then he's shooting back to. I mean, what an incredible thing to have because 20 years ago, you didn't even have access to that. If you wanted to watch a game that was out of town, you had to wait till the newspaper that it came out the next day to just read about it or see the highlights on SportsCenter.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the show. So, because I remember when we were concepting this with Shadow Lion, I remember we mentioned a few times the LeBron JJ Mind the Game podcast, and this Quick Snap feels like right up there. It's strategic. The chemistry between you and David is fantastic. First, tell me about your relationship with David, what he stands for, why you were so excited to work with him again.
Well, I met David in 2017, and we were together for about a week because I came back to the Patriots mid-season.
Yeah.
And then he got extremely sick after the first game we played together, and we were out in Colorado. We talked about it on the podcast yesterday because we had Jonathan Jones on, and we were talking about some of those trips where you stay for a week somewhere, and your family's not there, so you don't feel conflicted spending time with your friends. But David got really, really sick. They were worried that he wasn't going to make it. And so, he ends up getting better, and we become friends. And obviously the quarterback-center relationship, hence the name Quick Snap, which even that, trying to find a name, all the names were taken. all the ideas we had for the podcast, Danny would be like, it's already taken. So we came up with that, and, it's a pretty intimate relationship when you're putting your hand under someone's butt, 50 times a day. And, but we've had some great times together, and I think he's such a great person, and he's funny, and our relationship is a little bit of a banter back and forth, and I think you see that a little bit in the show.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, and the perspectives are a little bit different too because he's playing right now and I'm not, but we've played together, and he's, when I look back on my career, one of my favorite teammates of all time because he's just so tough, and that he's giving everything he absolutely has, not only to protect you when you're playing that position, but for the guys around him, being a leader on the offensive line, a captain on the team. And we talked about it also yesterday. I was not drafted, he wasn't drafted, and so you kind of group together, and that's something that you kind of wear on your shoulder as a pride. No one wanted me, but you made it this far, and here's David in his 10th year. So a lot of common ground there, and I think just a general love for each other. Yeah. And I hope that comes through when we're doing the show.
It completely does. The chemistry is amazing. It shows that you guys are very close friends. Tell me how the show's been going for you, how you want it to evolve.
Yeah. I think we're realizing, as we go, we kind of have these parameters, but, they evolve. And so yesterday we kind of threw some random questions out of David, like, okay, who's the best locker room DJ? Who would you allow to date your daughter? And he basically said, no one in the locker room except Hunter Henry. And I said, I would probably agree with that. But, just adding some different elements. And I think the one thing too, obviously we're talking to a New England audience, but I think we started adding some things at the end for me to kind of cover league-wide topics.
Yeah.
We've talked about even bringing some people from behind the scenes that we really appreciate, that they don't get a lot of recognition, but the team ops guys who plan our travel, plan our hotels,
Yeah.
people, just giving people some insight to like what it really takes to, back a team, to get teams ready to go. And I think we're going to have a lot of great guests. We've current, former players. I think there's even a possibility of getting some players from other teams throughout the league that I've made relationships with, and just give different perspectives. And
that'd be amazing.
I think we're open to suggestions. So as I'm learning, people put in comments like, you want to hear something, let us know. I think that's the beauty of doing a podcast, right? Like you can communicate directly to us through the producer in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns of plays, one of my buddies last night, he goes, love the podcast. I have an idea for a segment. He goes, what about just breaking down one critical play in the game?
Love that.
Get up on the whiteboard, do things like that. And I'm all for it. I think, for me, like I said, I want to be informative, and because of our relationship with David and because he's playing, we're able to do that.
Yeah, my wife wants to know if Tom's going to be on the show as well.
We're trying. I mean, his Fox deal is kind of, exclusive rights. So we're trying. We send a message all the time. But, it would be great to have him. So
we were talking backstage, and I would love for you to share this because I thought it was fascinating about the culture in the locker room. Because we were talking about breaking into Boston and making friends, and you obviously have lifelong friends from the locker room. Like, just talk everyone through like what the culture in an NFL locker room looks like.
I think it's one of the greatest experiences in my life that I'll ever have. You get to meet people that you would never cross paths with on a normal life, so to speak. You're getting to play with people who are from the inner city of Detroit, David Andrews, the back roads of Georgia. I mean, it's literally all-encompassing of what our country is, and I think what's great is you get to work together with guys and a common goal, and you literally become brothers. I mean, we had Jonathan Jones on yesterday, and the one thing that we talk is pretty unique is those relationships last. Like, I'm really close with Jacoby Brissett, and I may not see him for a year, but when I see him, because we've had these common bonds together, it's like no time has ever passed. And like I said before, I'm realizing one of the things that I'm missing most is that camaraderie, that brotherhood, those relationships. And with the good teams, you have those relationships with everybody. Some of these New England teams that I was on, it didn't matter if it was the defensive line, the offensive line, the defensive backs like Jonathan Jones, like Devin McCourty. I mean, we had such great leaders, Matt Slater. I mean, I can go on. But these guys who basically impact your life for the better for the rest of your life. And I think, like I said, one of the greatest experiences that I'll ever have in my lifetime is getting to know these people that if I didn't play football, I would never have that opportunity.
Amazing. And who's shaping the culture in the room?
On the good teams, it's the players. And I think for so long you saw that in New England, and I always talk about kind of this cyclical movement. The young guys learn from the really good older players. And then all of a sudden those younger guys, like the David Andrews and the Jonathan Jones, who learn from the Matt Slaters and the Tom Bradys and the James Whites, now they're those guys. And I think when you have that continuity in place, you always have a chance to have that culture.
Yeah, nice. What was the most special moment for you in your career in the NFL?
I mean, look, for me, I could selfishly say the years that I was a starter for different teams, but the 2018 season with the Patriots and the season we had, and a lot of people would say, what was your favorite game? And people would assume it'd be the Super Bowl and winning the Super Bowl, but it was actually the game before that, beating the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, because it was cold as hell. I was actually wearing a full body wetsuit, a trick that I learned from Tom because, it helps you retain your heat a little bit. And no one ever gave us a chance to win. And we just came out.
Like an actual wetsuit?
Wetsuit, yeah. Yeah, full body.
That's crazy.
Makes going to the restroom really hard at halftime. But it was one of those nights where that brotherhood, that camaraderie came in full circle, and you're at an away stadium, they're cheering against you the whole game. It goes to overtime, and it was just a whole team like kind of accomplishment, and it got us to the Super Bowl, but that almost felt like winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
What would you like everyone to know about the show before we wrap up?
I think, we're just trying to be real and be honest and be insightful, and I hope that the relationship that we have together comes through.
Yeah.
And like I said, if there's things that you want us to talk about, put that in the comments. I know our producer's checking those, and I think there's not a set in stone format. We're going to have guests on. We're going to have some weeks where we don't, and it's just kind of a feel thing. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Brian.
this was great.
You're such a smart guy, and I love the show as well.
Thank you.
And I hope everyone checks it out. Quick Snap on YouTube or any of the podcast platforms. And I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you.